we're thinking about what can I do to kind of help myself when I'm going through a difficult period of time emotionally, I'd say the first step is really kind of the noticing, right? It's really hard to figure out what do we want to do to help ourselves through a difficult time, or how do I want to navigate this kind of problem if I don't really know that it's happening, right? So I would say the first piece is like, can we really notice? Can we notice, what am I feeling? What are the thoughts? What are the narratives behind that feeling? Does it come with sensations in my body? Really want to try to occupy like kind of that bird's eye view, or kind of observing what's going on versus being in it, if that makes sense. So kind of after we get a sense of like noticing, right, we might want to tap into like, what are these feelings asking me for? One way that we can do this is sort of just think of them as their own separate person, right? If someone that you cared for walked in the room and was holding and carrying a lot of sadness, how might you meet that person? What might you offer to them? We can kind of use that as a framework for what might this emotion be asking for from me, right? We can be that resource to ourselves, we can be that resource to others. So kind of just slowing it down and creating a little bit of space internally to get a sense of, what am I noticing? What is this feeling asking me for? I would say kind of our next piece is like, once we have a sense of connecting with that emotion, maybe being curious about it, I would say one of your best tools in these moments is, how can I access a little bit of curiosity versus jumping to, what does this mean? How is this a problem? Right? But can we just be curious about what's happening inside of ourselves? And then I would say kind of that next piece, right? Do we have a sense of whether there's something that can be done to improve this present moment? It can be little, it can be large, but just what do we have access to in this moment that might kind of change the things that can be changed, right? And if we find ourselves in a situation where maybe it can't be changed, maybe we don't have the capacity to alter the context too much, then I would say we shift right into kind of my favorite part, which is, can I meet this with compassion? That doesn't mean that I have to accept it, right, or like it, but can I just kind of be with what is in the moment and cultivate a sense of compassion the same way that I might with someone that I love, right? Which can be trickier, I would say, to do with ourselves, but I tend to find kind of our best way forward. And oftentimes we find ourselves, right, as always in relationship with other people, as members of the community, right? Noticing that someone else might be in need of some support, coping with a difficult emotion or just going through a difficult period of time. So we can also do something similar when it comes to supporting someone else. And we can kind of break this down into like kind of 5 steps, right? The first one is just kind of the approach, right? And I really try to think of that as, again, like noticing and observing. It's really hard for me to help somebody else through something difficult if I don't notice that they're having a hard time, right? Oftentimes I make the comparison to like providing first aid, right? I can't really provide any aid if I don't notice that someone is hurt and I'm not willing to approach them in that moment. So that's kind of our first step, this noticing and approaching. From there, we listen non-judgmentally, which people tend to think is the easiest step, and I actually find sometimes quite tricky. It can be easy to listen. It's the non-judgmental piece that I think is a little harder. And the way that I sort of check in with myself, am I really listening in a non-judgmental way, is I try to suss out, do I have an agenda as I'm listening to this person? And even if that agenda comes from a kind, helpful place, we want to try to check that for the moment, just to hear what this person is saying and try to be with them aside from any, particular outcome. Even if that outcome we think is the right one, let's just give this person space and just try to take it in that moment. right? From there, try to give reassurance and offer some appropriate information. So another way I think about that is we give hope with facts, right? So again, using our first aid example, that might look like, someone comes in, they've got a broken leg, might say, we would expect that to heal within a certain period of time, and most people are able to get back to their normal activities, right? So we're giving some really basic facts that encourage that person to have a sense of optimism and hopefulness that we can get through this difficult period of time. Really important about this one, we don't want to offer something that we're not sure is true. So that might look like everything's gonna be okay. It's all gonna work out. We're not really quite sure, so it may not be helpful to offer that in the moment. So we really wanna try to ground ourselves in what is fact-based that might still offer some hope and some reassurance to this person. From there, kind of depending on what this person has shared, we might find it appropriate to encourage them to connect with a professional resource. This could look like therapy, this could look like a peer support group, this could look like a medical provider or a member of the clergy, right? We really want to connect them with an outside resource if that feels helpful, because we can't be everything to that person in this moment, and we want to connect them with somebody who's probably professionally trained if that seems helpful, right? Just like with first aid, we might give an ice pack, find a Band-Aid. We're not going to perform surgery, right? So kind of knowing what our limits are and encouraging that person to connect with someone who can help maybe in a more long-term or professional capacity. That person may be willing or not willing to accept that, and we just want to respect their autonomy, but we can always offer that option and just try to encourage them to think about it. We can also encourage them to use coping strategies that they may already have, right? Things that they have access to in themselves, right? And that doesn't have to be anything complicated. That could be taking a walk, that could be connecting with nature, that can be spending time reading a book or with your dog, whatever that person finds grounding or peaceful, or even just kind of a healthy distraction to give them a little bit of space from the emotions that they're sitting with right now. We really want to try to connect them to things that they know how to do and ways that they can help themselves. And that's helpful in a practical way. It also helps us to convey that we have a lot of confidence in this person's ability to help themselves, even if we also want to connect them to a professional as well. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. Those are kind of our general steps here, right? So we've got our first one, which is that approach, that assessing. Our second, which is listen non-judgmentally. Our third, which is give reassurance or hope with facts. Fourth, which is encourage appropriate professional help. And the fifth, which is encourage self-help or coping strategies. Thank you very much for watching and for being interested in being a resource to others in your community who might need it.